In letter 19, C.S. Lewis writes about Holy Communion. He says he doesn't write about Holy Communion very much because, well, there's a couple of issues. We might wonder, well, why is he talking about Holy Communion here in what is supposed to be the adoration section of the book? Well, Holy Communion for Lewis was a wonderful and a mystical thing. It led him to the experience of adoration, and so that's why he's talking about it. He hasn't written about it before. First of all, he says, because he doesn't feel himself qualified, which is something that Lewis will often say in his writings about theology. But the other reason, which seems to be the more important, is that what happens with Holy Communion is people try to dig into understanding, well, what is the bread and what is the wine and how does this supper work, so that they're analyzing something that, and the results of the analysis does not help Lewis. He is still left with questions and with mystery. When he reads works about Holy Communion, they don't really help him. And he doesn't, if he were to write like a book on Holy Communion or something, he would spend so much time talking about how all these things that these people have said, what's wrong with them, what questions that their positions raise up anew, that it would just kind of look negative and bad. So he hasn't touched it. And here in this letter, he does, just to kind of show what he's talking about, he has a long paragraph where he does look over some of the views. And he says, for example, when the disciples were first given the Lord's Supper, he says they're supposed to eat this man's flesh and drink his blood. He says, I doubt if they really understood what was going on. I certainly don't. He refers to transubstantiation, though he doesn't use that word. And he says, that doesn't help me because I wind up having these kind of pictures in my mind of plastic or something. Then the idea that it's the bread and wine aren't really anything, that nothing really happens with them. The whole ceremony is just an opportunity to remember Jesus dying for us. Lewis says, well, there's all kind of things that remind us of Jesus dying for us. Why does it have to be these particular things? So whenever he reads any opinion on Holy Communion, he still walks away with questions. So to his mind, he just says, you know what, it's mystery. And he just takes it as mystery. And he says something really brilliant in there at one point. He says, when Jesus gave us this thing to do, this meal, he didn't say, here, take this, he didn't say, take and understand these things. He said, just take them and eat them, take them and drink them, without any explanation. And so Lewis figures he doesn't have to understand everything. In fact, he figures that perhaps the Lord meant this to remain mystery to us, so that the result is that when he takes communion, he's trying not to think about all the theories because of what the bread is and what the wine is, because that distracts him, that takes away from the awe that is present. Because he does say that he recognizes that when the bread and the wine are served to God's people, and Jesus has got these special promises attached to these things, that somehow we're closer to God than we're not. And it's just an awesome thing to him. There's a story told of when Jesus was here at this communion rail taking communion, someone next to him looked at his face and it was just filled with wonder. So Lewis thinks that the Holy Communion is a mysterious thing. We need to just take it as it is and not be trying to figure everything out. The thing about what has happened with trying to figure everything out is it has split the church. And this is one of the things that bothers Lewis the most about it. He takes a very strong stand for mere Christianity in this letter. He says we shouldn't be, something like this should not be separating us. And what has happened is people have come up with all these different opinions about the supper, and it has turned into a divisive thing. And he doesn't want to get involved in the divisiveness of it. One thing that he finds about the communion that he does value is that in Jesus giving us wine and bread, he's given us objects to take of. And he says that it makes him realize that the heavenly truths that are here in our hands are real objective facts. These things have been given to us. God has, with his own hands, the Son of God has given us these things, and they represent to us all the wonderful blessings of Christ that we don't see, but we see these things. And the idea that these truths in heaven are real objective facts is important to Lewis, because he's so concerned about issues of truth and reality. And so he values the Lord's Supper for those very reasons.